We can change the world one heart at a time. We can change the world one heart at a time. I see you, I know you, you're a part of me. We can change the world one heart at a time. We can change the world one heart at a time. I see you, I know you, you're a part of me. My heart is open to love. My heart is ready to love you. We can change the world one heart at a time. We can change the world one heart at a time. I see you, I know you, you're a part of me. My heart is open to love. My heart is ready to love you. We can change the world one heart at a time. We can change the world one heart at a time.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Community Church. Our building is on Shaver Road in Portage, Michigan, on the ancestral lands of the Peoria Potawatomi people. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. It is the little brick church with the rainbow flag and the Black Lives Matter banner out front, because we believe that love is love, and it is our responsibility to dismantle white supremacy and build a beloved community that benefits us all. Our church is served most Sundays by our minister, Reverend G. Ludwig McCartney. We are a community on diverse spiritual journeys, and on other Sundays, we enjoy hearing differing points of views from guest ministers, lay leaders, and today, a guest speaker who I'll introduce to you a bit later. During the month of December, we are centering on welcoming as a spiritual theme of our church year focused on revolution. My name is Kimberly, and I'm happy to be your lay leader this morning. If you are joining us for the first time, welcome. We're excited that you tuned in. We invite and encourage you to attend the Zoom coffee hour following the service to get to know us better. You can find the link to coffee hour in the comments section of this Facebook video toward the end of the service. To learn more about our church, including our programs for children and youth, and other opportunities to connect with us during the week, visit our website at uucommunitychurch.org. I have two announcements. UUCC will begin hosting virtual Qigong classes in January. These classes are free and open to anyone who is interested in learning this ancient Chinese mind, body, spirit practice. contact the office at uucommunity@gmail.com for more information. Second, come and start your New Year's celebration with us at a virtual happy hour and trivia contest on Thursday, December 31st at 7 p.m. The trivia contest will be formatted like a pub trivia night with teams competing against each other for the coveted title of UUCC Trivia Champions. And a special thanks to everyone who is helping to make this morning's service possible. With full hearts, we affirm our relationships with one another. We recognize our agency and our connective power, and we accept our responsibility to be bold and courageous. We light the chalice, symbol of all that we are, all that we have done together, and all that we will, as our shared ministry encourages those within and beyond our walls. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Our reading this morning is authored by George Brooks. May the love that gives to life its beauty, the reverence that gives to life its sacredness, and the purposes that give to life its deep significance be strong within each of us and lead us into ever deepening relationships with all of life. Our fantastic guest speaker this morning is Nicholas Sienkiewicz. He is a conductor, educator, researcher, and mental health advocate currently based in Bloomington, Indiana. Nicholas's musical philosophy integrates practices of modern psychology and trauma-informed instruction into musical rehearsal. Nicholas has served as conductor in musical theater and for children, community, and educational choral ensembles. Most recently, his article, The Biochemical Power of Choral Singing, was published in the October 2020 issue of the Choral Journal. We all know Nick is our music director, and we know he is so much more. Nicholas holds a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry and a Bachelor of Musical Arts degree from Western Michigan University. He is pursuing his Master of Music in Choral Conducting at Indiana University, Bloomington. Welcome back to our pulpit, Nick.
Good morning. Thank you for that introduction, Kimberly. I am so excited to be here, and I am so happy for this opportunity. So, as many of you know, and as many of you are aware, usually the talks that I give are surrounding music. Music history, I give a presentation, and we go through and it's a little lecture. But today, given it's the last Sunday of our church year and before the new year, talking about new beginnings, and especially in a time where it's been difficult for many of us, I thought I would talk about something a little bit different. So this morning, I'd like to start with a story, and then we'll get into the talk for today. So my story goes like this. When I was in third grade, I remember sitting on the carpet during a classroom lesson. The teacher was reading and asking questions to the students. It was story time. My memory of that time is really hazy, but I think it had something to do with science, and that was something that I really loved and I really enjoyed. I was a really curious kid, and so I loved to get the answer right, something I'm still working on today. When I was sure I had the answer correct, I would eagerly raise my hand, like wiggling in my seat, huge grin on my face, because I was excited for the answer. After being the only one being willing to answer the questions, which is sometimes the case, my teachers told me to stop answering the questions. I believe she wanted to get other students the opportunity to answer questions. As a third grader, I was a bit puzzled. Wasn't this the point? Didn't my teacher want me to answer the questions? Why was she asking them if she didn't want them to have an answer? I wasn't provided with any reasoning for not trying to answer the questions. So I kept raising my hand. Well, my teacher wasn't very fond of that, and she handed me at the time what we called an action plan. Essentially, it's the equivalent to a third grade write-up or detention. I was very confused, and I was incredibly ashamed. I didn't know why I'd been written up. though my action plan said I was being a disruptive student. I tried my best to hide what happened. I thought the worst was over, but that evening happened to be parent-teacher conferences. So, like some sort of shameful ritual, all the action plans that the students got were placed on the desks of the students for their parents to see, in case we tried to hide it. I tried to hide mine under my name tag. It's a very large name tag, though it was found by my mother. And she wasn't upset, but was just about as confused as I was. From there on, I was much less curious. I was a lot less inquisitive, and I was really afraid to answer questions. My performance in class dropped, and I was scared to answer questions because I felt that answering questions was the wrong thing to do. I thought the reasoning for getting in trouble was my own nature, was those things that made me who I was: my eagerness, my willingness, my curiosity, my love of science, and my love of education. Shame killed my creativity and curiosity at that time. And that's what we're going to talk about today. A shame inhibits change. So I was inspired to talk about this a little bit as we are in a time of incredible divisiveness, and we've talked about this a few times. And I think it's interesting to evaluate it from a perspective of a younger individual, especially in the generation that seems to be pushing for a lot of these things. However, I want to caution against the use of shame. And so let's talk about shame. Shame, we've all felt. It's that feeling we get when we feel like we've done something wrong that's connected to our own personhood. So, for example, ever being told that you're lazy, or ever being told that you're a liar, rather than that you lied and made a mistake, or that you didn't do much today and you should try better tomorrow. We all know the same feeling of that wash of heat over our bodies, the redness in our face, and the questioning of how did I do this and what is wrong with me, rather than the behavior that was exhibited. Brene Brown, a shame researcher and vulnerability researcher, talks about shame as an intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. It's an inhibitor of connection, and when we are shamed, we feel isolated and alone. And so the talk today revolves around building relationships, especially with individuals that don't hold the same view as us. And we'll talk a little bit about where the water gets murky. But I'm encouraging everybody and everyone that shame is not an effective tool in order to promote social change. Shame inhibits change, and there's some research that goes behind that as well. One of the main issues that we see is the use of the internet nowadays. The internet is a great tool to stay connected with other individuals, especially during a time of isolation. Things like Zoom and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter allows us to stay connected with individuals that we haven't seen in a while. That allows us to see Christmas pictures and holiday photos and be with people in community with others, even though we might be separated. However, it also has its downfalls. The internet, like many things, seeks an external source of validation, and it allows individuals who hold different beliefs to have a place in order to share those things. Now, if every person in the world had a high emotional intelligence score and felt like they could appropriately use social media, it might be a different story. However, people are extremely fond of their beliefs and are convicted in the beliefs that they have. And so sometimes we can share something and it might not be taken well, and we might shame other people in order to believing a certain way. So, for example, the other day, a couple weeks ago, I posted an article about the coronavirus vaccination. And it's based on science and fact and all that sort of thing. And I had many people who reached out to me specifically um, to tell me that I didn't know what I was talking about, and that I was brainwashed, and that I was too young to understand what was actually happening in the world. Now, as a person feeling shame, that's quite harsh. as Kimberly said in my bio, I do have a bachelor's degree in biochemistry. And not even to say that, but more to say that I didn't feel like I should change. Actually, I was much more angry about the fact that an individual came after me about what I believe to be true. That can be said for other views that might not be true, that might not be true at all. If you believe the duck is yellow, even though the duck is orange, you will be convicted in that belief. And it is very hard for a person to get through to that belief through shame. You cannot tell an individual that, no, the duck is yellow, and you're wrong. That's only going to make them convicted in their belief more. And it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to develop a sense of understanding with a person when we can't relationship with individuals right now. We cannot be in a room with individuals right now. And we cannot seek to understand individuals at this point. Part of it comes from a desire to feel superior, to feel that your fact is the only truth. However, if some individuals believe that their truth is their truth, then that is their truth, to say it over and over again. You cannot tell a person that their experience is false without trying to establish common ground. And this is where tools of emotional intelligence come into play. Being able to be an active listener, even though someone's views are different from you, is so hard to do. And I've been working on it for a very, very long time, especially since I have such strong and passionate views, as I'm sure many of you do as well. Active listening doesn't just involve listening to the content of what a person says, but what it actually means and what they're actually saying. In reference to vaccinations, I had a friend early in the process who was telling me that they believed that the vaccine wasn't going to work and that they wouldn't take it because it wouldn't be effective and it would hurt them, that there was conspiracy surrounding the vaccination and that them themselves would not take it and would not encourage other people to take it. Even though I was providing them with facts and information about the scientific process and as to how this whole thing works, they still were not convicted in that belief. And I took a moment and I realized that the reason that they were saying those things is not because they might have believed them, which they might have in order for comfort, but it's because they're afraid, because they're fearful of what's to come. They'd rather live in a world where everything is wrong and bad at the same time because they know that pain and that pain is familiar. Being hopeful is difficult, and trying to change a mindset is also very difficult. So we have to be able to be active listeners with other individuals who might hold different beliefs than us. And we have to be willing to expand on our own beliefs in order to expand on the beliefs of others. Bringing music into this is a discussion we have quite often, as much of the music nowadays that we do in choral music and in orchestral music is moving towards the realm of social justice. Music is not just a thing for listening anymore, especially in a time where we have active movements like Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement. Music is a means for social change. And these conversations are had quite often. How do we approach a piece? How do we bring a piece to an audience of individuals that might not have the same view? For example, there is a famous set of works called Seven Last Words of the Unarmed by Joel Thompson. It was first premiered by the University of Michigan Men's Glee Club with Dr. Eugene Rogers. The piece is in 7 movements and is reminiscent of the 7 last words of Jesus Christ. But instead of using the last words of Jesus Christ, it uses the last words of 7 Black men killed by police brutality. People like Trayvon Martin and Amadou Diallo are mentioned in the work. Not only how do you address your own beliefs and deal with that, but how do you attempt to bring this piece to the public and try to relationship with them? How do you bring a piece about an experience that individuals might not have any experience with and tell them that this is truth? And this is where the most important part of differences comes into play, is establishing common ground. The route to understanding is establishing common ground. For example, we might not all be able to relate to the fear and pain of what it's like to be a Black person in America. We don't know what it's like at all. I don't know what it's like at all. And other individuals don't. So what if I held the belief that that wasn't the case, that there wasn't police brutality, that that wasn't actually happening? How do you relationship with an individual like myself? Well, I think we can all relate to the death of a child. And I think we can all relate to the feeling of pain that involves. And understanding that pain and understanding where it's coming from is so pivotal in order to do that. And in order to do that, we have to be able to understand ourselves as well and understand our own tendencies. I'm sure there's been many times where we felt irritable or unrestful because of something that somebody has said to us. But how do we take a moment and attempt to understand what they're saying and attempt to look at them in relationship with them? We have to be able to listen, and we have to be able to establish common ground. Harriet Lerner talks about this concept in a podcast. Harriet Lerner is she's a Dr. Harriet Lerner. She's a psychologist, and she talks about what it means to apologize. And in her book, Why Shouldn't I Apologize? She mentions how this idea that of locking two people in a room, right? We often talk about if two people have very different beliefs, that you just lock them in a room and they'll eventually work it out. Harriet Lerner, Dr. Harriet Lerner, talks about how that is not the case and that will not work. That is a superficial way in order to spend disbelief, because those individuals are only seeing the end goal in sight of getting out of the room and are not seeing the goal of actually relationshiping with one another. In order to develop change, in order to change mindsets, we have to be able to be with individuals, which involves active listening, which involves discussion, which involves common ground, and which involves coming to some sort of a resolution. We cannot make empty promises, and we have to be able to understand where the other person is coming from in order to do that. There's been times where we've been insulted or hurt that we want to go back at the individual because that is the pain that they gave us. It's defensive behavior. It's a mechanism in order to adapt to our survival. Part of shame, part of feeling shame, is actually believed to be a survival tactic, that it was used in really early times. It was developed in our brains in order for tribes to survive. For example, if somebody in the group was threatening the survival of the rest of the group, then they could shame that individual into leaving. And the natural shame response is something that we're all familiar with. But it won't allow anybody to change. All it will allow is somebody to shut down and come back. And through that active listening and common ground, we might find ourselves spinning with beliefs of another individual that we still don't agree with, or hurtful words that they may have said. And I'm not saying this to justify the behavior. Absolutely not. Because there are certain beliefs that discriminate against other individuals or marginalize individuals and communities. But it's understanding them. It's understanding where they come from to find the root of that in order to develop change. Forgiveness is a big part of this. In order to forgive somebody for something that they might have said. And now, like I said, it's not to justify the behavior. Forgiveness does not justify behavior, but forgiveness is for yourself and not the other person. Now, this might be a belief that is contested by others, right? We see it quite often where a family loses a son to a murder or an unknown cause, and they don't want to forgive the person that killed their loved one or took away their loved one. But the burden to bear is much too great, and we'll see a lot of individuals, especially, forgiving others for that space. We must be able to forgive. We have to, in order to be able to move on. And for more people, it's difficult than others, and I'm not perfect at any of these things either. But carrying around weight, especially in a time of heavy exhaustion, is really, really hard. And it can be exceptionally difficult. I'll talk about a little bit of my experience of living with a wonderful family this past summer, but who held very different beliefs than I did. In the beginning, it was exceptionally difficult to relationship. Every morning I would get up around 7 o'clock and we would have coffee and we would talk about the news and what was happening during the day. And there were certain experiences and beliefs surrounding things like Black Lives Matter and coronavirus that I did not agree on, and I knew for some in my conviction to be true. And it was very difficult to sit at the table. It was very difficult to drink my coffee. And I thought about this a lot. I read a lot of books on emotional intelligence, active listening, um, talking about people like Dr. Loretta Ross. It took 5 months before some of my views and some of my beliefs were finally able to transfer through understanding, through finding that common place, and through active listening with the other person. Now, there were times that I felt shamed, and I spoke up, and I told them that that was not appropriate and how it made me felt. Because at the end of the day, we all need connection. We all need to be able to relationship with other people. It's essential to our survival. Connection and culture are essential to our survival and our well-being. And it's becoming ever more difficult when small things, little things, can set us off. As Dr. Loretta Ross says, we need to direct that anger, not towards the individuals that hold those beliefs, but the institutions that perpetuate those beliefs through policy and who have more mainstream media in order to perpetuate those negative beliefs. We have to direct that anger to the people in power, put the burden on those individuals. Many people think of anger as a bad thing. And now, yes, it can be. It can result in loud verbalizations and redirecting vulnerable feelings to people or things that are not appropriate. But some people argue, like Harriet Lerner, that anger is passion in a different form. Anger can be used in order to fuel positive change, as long as we can understand that anger. So that anger that we feel towards another individual because of their beliefs is far more reaching than that one person. And we need to be able to direct that anger to more positive change. What can we do in order to try to develop the situation? And now, there are some things that just need time as well. In my experience this summer, it took 5 months, 6 months, almost 6 months, in order to have one point come across, and in order for that point to be brought up and discussed later, civilly. And that's the power of relationships, because we have common ground. We are all human beings. All of us are human beings. We have things that we love, and we have things that we don't like. We all eat, we all breathe, we all drink water. And although those seem like trivial things, it connects us. We're all coming from nature. We all have things that we can relate on. People talk about not focusing on differences, but trying to focus on the things that bring us together. While that is true, it is difficult to bring people together, bring on things that bring people together, when we are aware of things that put us apart. We have to be able to lean into negative feelings. We have to be able to approach those feelings with grace and with understanding. We are emotional beings. The point of this talk is not to say that we shouldn't act on our emotions. Absolutely not. Emotions come before logic every single time. We can look at it from an experiential standpoint, and we can also look at it from a neurobiological standpoint. We feel emotions before we actually are able to process them. But it's using those emotions that we feel, rather than becoming defensive, using primal instinct in order to save ourselves, is to take those emotions and use them and to understand them. Emotional intelligence is a key component. Self-management, self-awareness is a huge part of being able to understand ourselves. And once we can understand our own emotions and why we're feeling things, then we can begin to discuss things with other individuals that don't hold the same view. And we have to be able to do that. Shame will not work. And this is a generational belief as well. But I understand where that anger is coming from. And I understand where that pain is coming from. It feels like the only option. These last few years for many individuals have been frustrating, as our points are not getting across. And as the points of many are seen as corruption or lies. And how does one move from that when that's all that people believe? If you believe that everything that I say is a lie, then how, as an individual, even saying things that are true, you'll never believe it. And that's shame. That's taking the individual and giving them a label rather than removing their behavior. And this is something that we have to be able to do as well. We have to be able to understand where that is coming from. And now that does not mean it will always change. And that is the tricky part about us as humans, is that every person is very, very different in many different ways, not just with views, but also with values and morals and makeup. But it's a plea to try. It's a plea to try to understand ourselves and our own emotions. It's a plea to attempt to relationship with individuals that might not hold those same views. It's a plea to understand where that view is coming from, as it all has a rooted belief. I truly believe that. And it might not come out in a day or a week or a month or even a year, but attempting and trying to understand somebody is a pivotal tool, not just for us as adults, but for kids as well and children. I truly believe that emotional intelligence and these relationshiping skills are one of the most important things that we can teach our kids and teach future generations. Yeah, history and science and math and all that stuff is important, but being able to relationship with other individuals is an essential fact. There's been multiple studies on emotional intelligence that show that the most successful individuals don't have the highest IQ, but they have the highest EQ, or emotional quotient. Those individuals that are best be able to relate to others, the ones that make the best leaders and the best individuals working in an organization, are those with the highest EQ. And we have to be able to do that. And it takes, as I said, active listening, common ground, forgiveness, and understanding. As humans, we love to talk about ourselves. Why wouldn't we? It's great. But we also have to be willing to learn. We have to be willing to sit and listen and acknowledge. We have to be willing to grieve those negative feelings or feelings of hurt. And we have to be able to forgive those individuals. And it doesn't justify the behavior, but it allows for the burden to be bared on something else and not ourselves. So with that discussion, I'd like to end today with a quote by Dr. Loretta J. Ross, who studies this, especially in African American communities, and shame in communities. Instead of calling people out, we need to call people in. Instead of canceling people, we need to try to listen, and through understanding, we can rescue our own humanity by developing relationships. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for your very relatable words. The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather to grow more generous in spirit and in action. This is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We receive an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will sustain the self-supporting church and its many ministries. If it is yours to do, you may mail a check to our building, or you may give electronically. The gifts of the congregation will be most gratefully received.
Man, it hurts sometimes to live this life. Some days I'd rather just run and hide. Maybe then the pain would hide as well. Maybe then I could protect myself. But who's gonna win? Is that really living? Oh, I wish I didn't know. But the answer is no, nobody will win. 'Cause I could close my eyes and pretend I don't see. I could close my mind and pretend that I'm free. But my soul knows the truth. Life means stepping back in. I'm gonna open my heart again. Man, it hurts sometimes when I've done wrong. Some days I'd rather just move on. Maybe then I wouldn't have to cry. Maybe then I could protect my pride. But who's gonna win? Is that really love? And oh, I wish I didn't know that the answer is no, nobody would win. 'Cause I could close my eyes and pretend I don't see. I could close my mind and pretend that I'm free. But my soul knows the truth. Life means stepping back in. I'm gonna open my heart. I could close my eyes and pretend I don't see. I could close my mind and pretend that I'm free. But my soul knows the truth, that life means stepping back in. I'm gonna open my heart again.
As we extinguish the chalice, let us remember to keep the flame awake and alive in our souls, and let the light of the chalice bind us together, showing us the way. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
So thank you for being with us today, and thank you for listening. It's an essential part of us as being human. Thank you for listening to the music and allowing our voices to be heard. As we go into this new year, as we all know, New Year's resolutions tend to fall flat. And within a month of setting a resolution, we tend to drop it. So I encourage you to challenge yourself to find ways in order to relationship with others, especially those that might not have the same views as us, or especially those that you tend to conflict with. Approach it from an area of understanding and love and compassion for other individuals, because I truly believe that is the only way that we can be able to move forward, is through relationshiping with others. You must, rather than calling people out, be able to call people in. Thank you.